I welcome you to the Messiah channel. We are going to discuss identity theft, ID loss, identity theft regarding the children of Jacob. How do you prove your identity? We have true Hebrews and false Hebrews. And so for those who are true Hebrews, you need to be able to prove your identity as a descendant of Jacob, because historically there has been attempts to steal the identity of the true Hebrews and to destroy the history and the identity of the true Hebrews. How do you prove your Hebrew identity? And in answering that question, we are going through the scriptures. And the first scripture is Joel chapter 3, verses 5 to 7. You can read Joel chapter 3, verses 5 to 7 to prove who you are as a Hebrew. In Joel 3, 5 to 7, there will be judgment on nations. The nation who stole the silver and gold of the people of God. And so, which nation stole the silver and gold of the people of God? And you have to look through history. And let's look at what happened in Africa, where the resources of the Africans were stolen. And don't forget Gold Coast, a slave coast, where the resources of the nations were plundered by European powers. Don't forget Congo, a nation with a lot of gold, where the resources of the nations were plundered by European kings. And don't forget King Leopold, who I believe masterminded the killing of so many Congolese, killed them because he forced them to do work for the king. And the resources of Congo. Congo is a nation that has a lot of good resources. The resources were stolen by the European powers. Joel 3 chapter 5 verse 7 also says that the Lord will judge the nations for selling his children, and which people were sold. Definitely these are the Hebrews, the children of Jacob, the children of Judah, who were sold into slavery. And Joel chapter 3 verse 5 to 7 says that the Lord will redeem those who were sold, and the Lord will judge those who sold them. And so if you look at the history of people whose gold and silver were stolen, people whose resources were stolen, you are looking at the true Hebrews of Africa, and looking at what happened in the Gold Coast and what happened in Congo, where the silver and gold of the Hebrews were stolen by European powers. Still proving your identity using the Bible, go to Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10 is what we call the Table of Nations. Genesis chapter 10 discusses the descendants, the generations of Noah, the sons of Noah. And if you trace the generation of Noah, and then you get to people like Mizraim, you get to people like Cush. Mizraim is another name for Egypt. Cush is another name for Ethiopia. So if you look at the Bible, looking at the Table of Nations, Africa is very prominent. It shows the preeminence of Africa in the kingdom of Yahweh, the preeminence of Africa in the story of the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. And we are still looking at the Bible improving the identity of the Hebrews. And let's look at Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 4. In that scripture, the Lord said that the children of Jacob will serve their enemies in a land that is not theirs. Which people serve their enemies? These are the people who were sold as slaves to serve their enemies. And they were sent to so many parts of the world, particularly including the United States. And United States is a land that is not the land of the Hebrews. And are you saying that U.S. is an enemy of the Hebrews? Definitely yes, because they treated them as enemies, or they treated them like enemies. The slaves who were scattered to the four corners of the earth were treated more than enemies. They were lynched, they were raped, and they were killed, and they were forced to work without any compensation. Okay, so we are still proving the identity of the true Hebrews. If you're a true Hebrew, how do you know you're a true Hebrew? You have to go through the Bible, and let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 28. And Deuteronomy chapter 28 talks about the blessings of God and the curses of God. And if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 28, particularly verse 46, the Lord is saying that there will be curses on the children of Jacob, and those curses will serve as a sign and as a wonder. So if you read the history of any group of people and you see the curses that were imposed on them, you can determine that these people were inflicted with certain curses, peculiar curses, strange curses. Oh, no wonder they are the children of Jacob. They are the children of Judah. So Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 46 says that the Lord will cause the enemies of the children of Judah to inflict curses on them, and those curses will serve as a sign that these people are the true Hebrews. Let's look at maps. How do you prove that you're a true Hebrew? Looking at the maps. I refer you to the Negro Land map, a map called Negro Land. There used to be a map describing the kingdom of the Negroes. We call it the Negro Land maps. The map was made in 1727 maps, the old maps of Africa. If you look at that map, you will find the kingdom of Judah in West Africa. Why did they call it the kingdom of Judah? They call it the kingdom of Judah because that place was inhabited by the Hebrews, the children of Judah, who migrated from Jerusalem after the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. They moved across the African continent and they settled in West Africa in a place called the Kingdom of Judah. And the map of Africa that existed in 1727 actually displays the Kingdom of Judah. The Kingdom of Judah was located in a place that used to be called the Slave Coast. That's the place where nations like Ghana lie presently. And you also have to look at the slave voyage records, the records that accompanied the slave ships, the slave trade, the slave voyage records. It will show the names of people with Hebrew names. Those names were changed to European names in an attempt to destroy the identity of the Hebrews and to conceal the identity of the Hebrews. The names were changed. And if you look at the slave voyage records, you get to see names that were Hebrew names, indicating that those who were captured and sold as slaves were actually Hebrews who resided in the so-called slave coast that actually was the kingdom of Judah. And there's a report called Nixon Report. And the Nixon Report is a report that says that the Igbos, the tribe, the ethnicity, the group of people called Igbos in eastern Nigeria, they are the Hebrews of West Africa. So if you are talking about tribes or kingdoms in Africa that have Hebrew ancestry, they definitely include the Igbos in eastern Nigeria. It also includes the Asantes and the Akans in Ghana, who actually lived in the Gold Coast that was part of the kingdom of Judah, according to the Negro land map that existed in the year 1727. That map is no longer there because in an attempt to destroy the identity of the true Hebrews, those maps have been corrupted. They have been destroyed by the European powers who actually engage in the notorious acts of slavery and slave trade. How do you prove your identity as a Hebrew? You prove that you are a true Hebrew. Modern technology has given us an opportunity to prove the Hebrew identity of so many people, including Africans and Africans living in Africa and Africans living outside of Africa. A particular case is the tribe of Limba, the Limba tribe in southern Africa, by DNA records. Through DNA records, it has been shown that they are actually Hebrews. And I'm not saying that you can only prove your Hebrew identity using DNA. DNA could be false. It is only Yeshua Elohim who actually knows who the true Hebrews are. But even if we forget about what is written in the Bible, DNA records also have shown that there are a lot of people who actually trace their genealogy, their ancestry to Jacob. It has been proven by DNA evidence. How do you know that you are a true Hebrew? You know it by looking at the scripture. If you are a true Hebrew, you know that you have not been regarded, contrary to the false narrative that the Hebrews, the Jews, have been regarded, looking at what happened in Israel in 1948. And we have to look at the scripture. And let's look at Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11. In that scripture, it's written that the Messiah, Yeshua, will regather the scattered of the children of Judah from where they have been scattered, from the islands of the sea, mentioning places like Patros, mentioning places like Cush, and Cush is Ethiopia, and the islands of the sea. And so don't let people deceive you that the Hebrews have been regarded just pointing to Israel and the flag of Israel and pointing to what happened in 1948. The true Hebrews have not been regarded, and the regathering, the second Exodus, will come during the time of Yeshua. And read Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11, to understand that the true Hebrews are still scattered in all the four corners of the earth, and the person who is going to regather them is the Messiah himself. It is not Lord Balfour, it's not the Prime Minister of England, it's not the President of the United States, it's not the Pope who is going to do the regathering. It is the Messiah, Yeshua himself, who will regather the scattered of the children of Judah, according to Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11. So you can use the scripture to prove that you are a true Hebrew, and you can also look at historic maps and historic events to prove that you are a true Hebrew. And one of them, as I said, is the map that existed in 1727, the Negro Land map that showed the kingdom of Judah located in West Africa. Thank you, and make sure that you know who you are as a true Hebrew, and you have to be able to prove your Hebrew identity by looking at the Bible and also looking at historic records, and also looking at the fact that the calamities that were inflicted on you as a Hebrew is not comparable to any other calamity, because the Lord said in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 40 says that those curses that were imposed on you will serve as a sign, as a wonder, to prove that you are a true Hebrew. Thank you, and be awake as a true Hebrew.